started with our graduate. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson. We're going to get started with our graduate workshop. We have Edward Chen, Daniella Alvarez Vargas, and Joseph Wong. So these guys are over at UCI, and they are going to be presenting just their experience, going over sort of like a panel that we can ask them our questions that I've already handed in, and then also open up a Q&A at the end. So I'm very much looking forward to this. I know you guys as well. I will let you guys take over if you want to have your brief full introduction, and then take it from there. You guys have the rest of the time, so as much time as you guys need. Thank you so much again for being here, and everyone, let's give them a very warm welcome. Yay! Thanks, guys. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Sorry, so we wanted to share a screen. Would it be possible to do that?
Of course not. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. Okay.
Wow. This dual screen thing is really throwing me off right now. All right. Hey, everybody. So we're going to go through some brief introductions for three of us. And then from there, we can go right into answering some of the questions that people had that you sent to us over email, Devin. Thank you. So I'll start first, since people have seen me before and heard me talk before, but I'll just go through an introduction here. So I'm Ed. I'm a fifth year doctoral student. Now I'm called a doctoral candidate over here at UC Irvine in the School of Education. I'm a first generation Chinese American college student. So on my slide here, it says ABD next to doctoral candidate. ABD is a special term used in doctoral programs that stands for all but dissertation. So what that means is that is the last thing I technically have to do in order to earn my doctorate and then be called a Dr. Ed from here on out.
Woohoo!
Yay! And that's going to happen like sometime in April or something, when I finally do the whole like dissertation defense thing. So I think I've briefly mentioned this before in a previous meeting, but I study what is known as numerical cognition or mathematical cognition. Basically, the questions here are like, how do kids learn and do math? And then what kind of processes influence the way that people think about math? And so a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the stuff that I do in this office space, but also like over Zoom and in lab, involves like creating an experiment, running the experiment with my undergrad team. And then on the other hand, I also like looking at kind of meta science kind of topics. So I do a lot of like meta analyses, which we can talk about at some later time.
And then we'll hand it over to Joseph.
Oh, cool. I'm next. Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Joseph Wong. I'm a third-year doctoral student at UCI in the teaching, learning, and educational improvement, concentration, and then my sub-concentrations in digital learning and educational technology. My research, or I call myself a learning experience designer and researcher, and I'm motivated by questions at the intersection of science education, digital media, and higher order thinking. There it is. Yeah, perfect. And so, more specifically, my research focuses on the integration of pedagogical learning design and user experience. And so that's what learning experience design is. It's looking at how learning principles and instructional design are guided with the integration of user experience. You might have heard like usability, affordances and constraints like with technology, and all of that is underpinned by using mediums such as online, virtual, augmented, and mixed reality to better understand how we can use these kinds of metaverse type experiences to improve transferable skills. Cool, that's all I got.
Yeah, that's awesome, Joseph. Ed and Joseph are super awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniella Alvarez Vargas, and I'm currently in my fourth year in the PhD program. This is my dog, Nimbus, who's joining us today. So I come from Colombia, which is in South America, and I just kind of wanted to include a little bit of my culture here to give you a sense of my cultural background. I immigrated to Miami, Florida when I was 5 years old, and pretty much lived there until I came here to UC Irvine for my PhD. I was really inspired to pursue my PhD from helping to raise my younger siblings, who are here on this bottom left-hand corner, because I saw them develop over time. They're about 11 and 14 years younger than me.
Really contributing to their just like how much they learn and how well they develop. I really inspired me to want to have more children.
Develop and learn, and pursue their optimal to have optimal learning experiences and also to reach their full potential. And so some of my research interests, they are a little varied. They kind of model Ed's interests a lot, and that's why we're in the same lab. So I've been working a lot on kind of co-designing a suite of fraction ball games, which is shown here on the left-hand side, where we repainted a basketball court to reflect fraction and decimal parts of a whole. And we use a game structure to encourage students to engage in fraction and decimal arithmetic. And so that's helping to make math learning playful, socially meaningful, and engaging. And so that's kind of what we're pursuing with that work. And then another line of my work is testing out different statistical methods to better forecast what we should expect to be the long-term impacts of interventions, which is using very similar experimental designs like Ed was talking about. Yeah, and that's pretty much all about me. And so I'll stop sharing screen for now, and maybe we could jump into the questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So I have the list of questions pulled up on the side here. So the first question we're going to try and answer here is a pretty simple one. It's how long does a PhD program last for usually? So our program here at UCI for the School of Education is 5 years. And on average, they take about 4 to 6 years. It really depends on the program, really depends on the school. Some people, there's also individual differences that come with how long a PhD program lasts for. Some people are real go-getters and they finish earlier than what is expected of them. I think we do have somebody in the program who's like
Doran.
Jenny Wu, I think.
Jenny Wu,
There are a
yeah.
couple people in this program who are finished their PhDs before the expected time. And then of course, there's also people who need a little bit more time to get some work done or to kind of prepare their like CV for job applications. So they stay like maybe an extra year. But one thing to keep in mind with the length of a PhD program is actually the funding that goes into a PhD program. For the most part, PhD programs are at least fully funded.
Yes, they should be.
They should be fully funded,
Mhm.
meaning that you don't pay tuition if you're in a PhD program. And everybody knows that tuition is mad expensive,
Mhm.
and we wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise if it wasn't fully funded. So we're able to come to school, we're able to learn, we're able to do research, we're able to be teaching assistants. But that funding is only guaranteed for a certain amount of time. So for my cohort, which was the one before Daniella's, I think we got all 5 of our years fully funded. So we never had to worry about it. By the time I would graduate, I would have never paid any bit of tuition. But sometimes programs lose funding. A lot of PhD programs lost funding past within the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that's really nice about that full funding is that that includes also getting paid each month for your work. And so it's not only that you get tuition paid for, but you can actually make money to live, right? So to pay your rent and to buy your food and things like that. And so we highly encourage that when you look for PhD programs, you find a program that's funding you for the duration of that program.
Another thing that I think that is really important is that sometimes schools will fund their funding is tied to a specific professor or PI that you're working with, while other schools your funding is tied to the school itself. And so at UCI, it's really cool in that our funding is actually tied to the School of Education or UCI Grad Division, and it's not tied to any one particular professor. Which is kind of nice in the sense because what that allows for is room to kind of like play the field a little bit. In essence, if you went to a school like CU Boulder, for example, is another school I applied to way back when, and their funding was tied to a specific PI, and that PI, she only had funding for like a year or a year and a half. And so basically, past 2 years, you would then have to search for funding on your own. But one of the nice things about UCI, I think all UCs actually, I'm not exactly sure, but one of the really nice benefits is that, let's say your own advisor doesn't have a grant or a fund to fund you on a research role, but the school will fund you regardless. And if you change advisors, for example, which happens all the time, you're still able to continue going to school there.
So there's multiple options in terms of being paid when you're in a PhD program. So funding is one thing for your tuition, but the school also hires you or the department or a PI/advisor will hire you into different positions. So there's technically like three, but I'll just combine two of them. There's a teaching assistant, which also comes with readership. So those two are very similar in that you're normally going to be teaching like discussion sections or like labs with like undergraduate students, sometimes graduate students too. And then the only real difference between a TA-ship and a readership is that readers just grade. That's how we do it here. I don't know how different it is in other places, but readers just grade. So that's teaching assistants and readers. The other sort of option is a GSR, which is a graduate student researcher. And this one is more dependent on like whether or not your advisor or somebody else within the department or somebody else in a different department actually has money to fund you to help them do research. So you might get hired for a variety of different projects. They'll have you do a lot of different things. Could be data analysis, could be data collection, a lot of different things. But then in that position, you're focused on research. So if you're doing that, you're not going to be a TA, you're not going to be a reader. Oh wait, there's one more, fellowships.
Oh yeah. Nice.
Well, you and Joseph both have NSF, so maybe you should talk about the NSF fellowship thing.
Good point. So the third possibility is a fellowship, which is when you there's many different types. The one that Joseph and I have, we applied to the NSF and they gave us money to pursue a project that we proposed to them, and that was based on what we proposed as a research plan and also our merit with the work that we have done as graduate students or undergraduate students, because you can also apply as an undergrad. And so that makes sure that we receive a set stipend each month for 3 years. And that's been really helpful because it gives you the flexibility of either not doing work for anybody else, only working for yourself, and also choosing when you prefer. Yeah, exactly. And Joseph could talk a lot more about this too. You can choose when you want to TA, to be a reader, or to do anything else, but you're not forced into it by necessity of, receiving some form of payment.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten this fellowship if it wasn't for Daniella, actually. She was my mentor when I started the program during my first year, and like I was working with her late nights trying to figure out like, is this the perfect application or not? But because she had won the year prior. But yeah, one of the really nice benefits also of being on a fellowship is that you're no longer even tied to the school in some ways. Basically, your funding comes from a separate agency, in this case, the National Science Foundation for the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. But there's also different grants like the IES Postdoctoral or Institute of Education Sciences Postdoctoral Fellowship. I know NIH, Gates Foundation, missing one more, like Bright Scholars, like Fulbright Scholars. Like there's a ton of different Ford as well, like the car company. They also provide fellowships, and this is a really neat way. They usually pay a little bit more than what the school offers, which is nice, and you also get a lot of freedom back to your time to focus on research.
So probably should have mentioned this before, but if you have questions at any time, feel free to raise your hand or post in the chat so we can see it. With that said, does anyone have any questions so far about length of a PhD program or funding when it comes to like applying for a PhD program or being in one?
Yeah, actually, I had a question in regards to what does the application look like differently, between a fellowship or going directly through the school? Is it different processes, or is it generally the same type of process when it comes to applying?
Sorry, one more time, Devin, the difference between applying for
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just the difference if you're like applying for a fellowship versus if you're applying via traditional method, just directly through the school for a program. I was wondering if there's different application processes, or is it generally the same?
Oh, okay. So we're talking about different types of funding that you would get at school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Normally for TA-ships, you don't necessarily apply. It's more like you fill out an interest form and like what classes you would want to TA for or be a reader for, and then they just try to match you as best as they can. And they usually do that if you haven't already declared that you are either a GSR or doing some or on a fellowship. So when it comes to fellowships, there's typically, it's like a scholarship. So there's like different applications all the time that you can apply for. They all ask for slightly different things. Usually there's some kind of like personal statement, maybe a research statement or something like that. And there's different types of fellowships. There could be those for research, like what Joseph and Daniella have. Then there could be ones for like teaching, which is how I got into the community college thing that we're doing right now. And then for, what was the other one? Oh, GSRs. GSRs, those are kind of weird. Sometimes you see ads for them in like a listserv within your school's department. Like they'll send like an email out like, hey, there's a GSR position. Like this professor is looking for somebody who can help them with this. Usually it happens like that, or if like a professor like personally comes up to you and emails you about it, you just like kind of apply to them normally. And the process for that is entirely dependent on like the PI or the advisor for that project.
And just to clarify, they're applying to graduate school, and then is one application, and then applying to each of these different fellowships or scholarships are a separate application. Devin.
Thank you, guys. That was spot on. And also, I don't know if you saw the chat message, but Nancy also had a question for you guys. How did you find out that the funding was tied to a department versus a professor/PI?
Great question. For me, I don't think I found it on their websites. Some graduate programs might post that in their like webpage of the school where it says apply to our graduate program. These are the first, this is where you should come. When I truly found out was when I talked to the professor I was applying to at the schools. So before applying, you typically want to ask them if they're accepting any new students, because sometimes they just don't have the capacity to mentor new students. So when I spoke to Drew, our advisor, I asked a couple of these kinds of questions and he shared that with me. But you can also always email the director or supervisor of the graduate program, and they can tell you that information too, if it's not already explicitly available.
Yeah, this is a good strategy because I didn't do this. I went into the interview process for, I think it was a joint doctoral program with Berkeley and University of San Francisco or something like that. And I didn't find out until at the interview that they had no funding for me, which was like kind of rip.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, but you know, it's okay. I bombed the interview anyway, so it's fine. I got in here. But it's super important if you know, money is like a pretty big deal because we're gonna be poor. It's totally fine and it's totally appropriate to like ask them if they have funding or space for a new student, right? Maybe you want to ask a specific professor that you want to work with, because PhD programs are typically like an advisor-advisee relationship. So, ask the person who you're interested in working with directly if they have that, or asking the department itself if they have funding for new students.
Yeah, I would say I know money is typically like a weird, touchy subject, but in terms of like your funding, like that's something that is pretty common to like just request and talk about up front. Because I didn't find out for CU Boulder until I came out for an interview weekend. And then they were like, oh yeah, actually I might have funding for 1 year, but not. And then the other big thing also is sometimes professors don't respond to emails, especially if you're like an incoming student that they're not directly advising right away. To setting up an interview and to find out these kinds of like programmatic questions or logistical questions can be difficult. And so looking for that, like as Daniella suggested, like their program director or coordinator, like they'll typically respond really fast and they'll know the answer.
Okay. Sorry, did I interrupt? Was there another
Oh,
question?
no, I was going to say thank you. Yeah. You guys want to move on to the next question? Or make sure no one else has any questions first. I think we're good. Yeah, we can move on to the next one.
All right, so on our list, our next question is, how much experience in psychology did we have prior to our PhD program? Yeah, I'll go first. So I did my undergrad in psych and education here at UCI as well. So I guess I have those 4 years, but then I mostly took classes that once I finished all of my like prerequisites, I took classes and stuff that I wanted to know more about. So that was like cognitive development. It was memory stuff, which is, where all my research interest comes from. But then I didn't apply to a PhD program right away. Some people apply straight out of their undergrad, so like within their senior year they apply. But I think a lot of people don't end up doing that. There's a huge variety in the types of people that like come into a PhD program. Some people out of undergrad, some people have gotten their master's in something else or a lot of different things before they come into the program. Some people don't earn a PhD until like later on down their life. So I had like a gap year where I was working in like after school settings, and I was a volunteer in an occupational therapy program, which was a way to help kids with special needs develop social skills. And also, well, this is a special program because it taught these kids how to do karate, which is pretty neat. But occupational therapy is a field that I think some people would be interested in going into, because it's not about teaching kids martial arts. It's more about teaching people the skills that they need to function in daily life. So some people don't know how to make eye contact. Some people have trouble with like speech impediments or like with feeding. So these are the types of like activities that will limit somebody in their daily life that an occupational therapist can assist with.
For me, the experience that I had was very similar. I just did my undergrad in psychology. I did a minor in statistics. And I did get involved with research at my university. So I was there for about 4 years, just in the same lab doing ongoing studies on children's spatial skill development and how that related to math understanding and development. And so that's what kind of put me onto, I received a lot of mentorship through that lab, and that's what put me on to wanting to apply to the PhD program. And then I did that right as I was saying in my senior year of college. And there was just a lot of resources to help me do that at that university.
For me, I took a very untraditional route to a PhD, and we can talk more about that later. But I did my undergrad at UCI as well, but in public health sciences and bio. So I think the only psych, it's not even a psych class, it was a neurobio and cognitive science class. But I did that as an upper div as a part of my bio major. So it was more looking at, memory, but also everything from like neurons and things like that, and fMRIs. But I would say I had zero. Besides AP Psych in high school, I had zero psychology classes in all of undergrad. But that's just goes to say that like even though I did my, you know, I did my bachelor's in public health science. I'm in doing a PhD right now in education, and it's very common. Maybe not very common, but it's common to come from a different background and be in a PhD program that might not be where your bachelor is from.
I think some of the stuff that we mentioned just now kind of applies to the next question we have on our list, which was that do the schools that we went to before we went to graduate school have an impact on the quality of PhD program that we can get into? I think I would be lying to say that it didn't
Yeah,
to some extent.
yes and no.
Yeah, I was like yes and no. So like PhD programs are very much focused on research. So I mean, for the most part, right? At least definitely ours, definitely ours, because we're a research institution, and there are a lot of research institutions in the U.S. So a lot of these programs would like for their applicants to have had some form of research experience prior to coming in. You all have a really great opportunity to do that with the upcoming research symposium. So like if you have a chance and you really want to get into a PhD program or something similar to that, like some kind of research job, definitely attend. And if you can, present something there. So like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, which I've learned, this is kind of like the hidden curriculum that you find out about PhD programs once you're in them, is that there's so much influence based on social networks. So sometimes like if you're applying to work with a person who knows people you have worked with, they might have talked to each other and that'll make you stand out more amongst all the other applicants. And so that happens. Or they might be more willing to accept you as a student because they're like, oh, if they work with so-and-so, then they must be good, or they must know how to do X, Y, Z, and that's going to be really helpful for me. And so sometimes that happens, and I've noticed that. I didn't know that until I got here, and people were like, oh, you worked with Shannon Pruden, who I worked with as an undergrad, and I didn't know she was this like famous person to some people, but apparently she was. So I don't know.
Yeah, we wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
We're dumb undergrads. We don't know who's important.
It also doesn't matter to anyone else in the world but the academics in that social circle. It's like, so it's kind of weird, and elitist maybe.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very gatekeepy,
Yeah.
I guess would be the right term.
Yeah, certainly, very much so. I would say from my experience, the college or undergraduate, even community college that you go to doesn't necessarily make as much of a difference in when you apply for grad school, you're applying to be with that professor. And I would say that matters more. That like network and that relationship you try to build with that professor and that fit matters more. And because for graduate school, where it's different from like med school or dental school, is that you're applying for the school. The school looks at you. But for graduate school that has a focus on research, really, if that professor wants you, you're pretty much in. If you can get that to happen, right?
So it sounds like a lot of it is based around networking as well. Is that right? Like if you network as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most necessary, but it will help a lot. So like for like undergraduate research symposiums or like conferences where a lot of academics like show up, that's also a really good time to be able to talk to people within the field, people that you're interested in, to see if maybe they have a space for somebody like in the next like couple of years, or they would have funding to like have a new student. So yeah, going back, like the school that you go to, it matters, but only matters to the extent of the experiences that you get from being at that school, right? And the people that you get to work with at that school. So like if you're all in the community college right now, you would probably want to be doing classes and stuff that you would want to, if you want to go into research, that is, like do classes and stuff you're interested in, that you want to do research in, do classes that would give you the requisite skills that would allow you to succeed in graduate school. And then after that, I guess it just comes down to like finding the right fit between you and somebody, like some professor within a graduate program that you want to work with.
Yeah, I can be real. Like, I went to UCI. I worked with a professor named Brad Hughes, and I submitted my UCI grad application the day before it was due. The main reason was I wasn't intending to apply to UCI at all, because they didn't there wasn't a professor that really fit what I wanted to do. And then my PI that I was working for at UCI was like, "Hey, did you hear Lindsay came back from Chicago? You should apply. I'll text her right now." I don't know if he really did text her or not. I would imagine he never told me, but I did apply because there was a huge alignment there, and I was able to get an interview with her and just to meet with her and chat with her. And I would say it was from that chat that got me the position at UCI. I'm pretty sure they didn't even read my the rest of my application or look at the GRE score or any of that. Like there was a fit, and like she saw that it was cool and it worked out.
And if you don't have those kinds of connections, you can be the networker yourself. So you can reach out by email to the professors and or go to conferences and things like that. Typically, the professors that are responsive are probably going to be a great fit anyways. So Drew was responsive to me. I emailed him and he got on a Skype call with me. And that's because he makes sure to only accept students when he's got the capacity to. And so it's good to know. So go ahead, and if you can't network, maybe in your school or based on your connections already, just go ahead and make that connection, because it's totally fine to do that. And it can be nerve-wracking, but I highly encourage you to do it. It's not wrong to reach out via email.
Yeah, one way you can probably do this is, you're taking classes in psych. So if you're taking a class that you really like and you like that professor, in this school right now probably won't have like research opportunities for you, or like a way for you to like get into a PhD at a community college. That doesn't really happen. But the thing is, they might know somebody who does, right? They might know somebody who has a position open or might have a position opening that you can definitely apply for.
That'll be Ed in the next year probably.
Oh shoot. Okay. Any questions so far related to that? Oh, this is a great question. So, okay, did we read papers published by faculty members to determine who is the right fit for your research interests? I did. I don't know if you too. Yeah. So this was important because they want to make sure you fit as much as you want to make sure they fit with you. So you want to check recent publications from people from faculty members to see kind of what stuff they're into currently. And if that stuff that they're into currently is related to stuff that you're into, then that's a good fit. And definitely in your statement of purpose that you would write for the application, make it really clear how good of a fit you would be for that. I see a hand go.
Ed made a really good point. That and Daniella as well, when she talked reaching out to the professors that you might be interested in, this is where you shine compared to other applicants. If PIs love to talk about their own research, and they love it. And if you're if you read their paper and you know a little bit about it and you're able to, that's pretty much the entire interview. You're going to be talking about how great they are, or how great their research and impactful it is, and why your interests align with that. And that's also a great way to that's something you should also be including when reaching out to these professors, because that's going to make you stand out, and that's how they're going to know that you did the work, as well as whether or not your interest is genuine.
Joe, you have a question? See your hand up.
I don't have a question per se. It's actually, I also have a master's, so I have experience with this as well. And in both undergrad and applying to grad school, I was planning on doing the PhD, but things changed when I went to the school. But I was always looking at where I wanted to go, what department I was interested in, and then I went through and looked at all the different professors, you know, takes on things and papers and things like that. And it definitely helps to know more of at least one or two or three people you might want to work with. Maybe even just focus on one. I really like this person's work in this, and I've read their, you know, what they've said on this, and maybe even put two. And you know, it's something that definitely stands out in application processes. I've known people who worked in the, you know, application departments, you know, reviewing all these things. So they like to see someone who knows the school, done their research, and is interested in a specific thing. That always stands out. So, you know, whenever I'm working with college, high schoolers going to college or college students applying to grad school, I always emphasize that. Do they always do it? No. But I always emphasize the importance of that because it does stand out. And if it's, you know, usually we do it genuinely, and the person may not be who we want to actually work with in the future, but we're not stuck to them, like you had said earlier, you know, especially where it's tied to the school, you can move around. And you know, I had to do that myself in my graduate programs, but it definitely is good, a good look on applications, and in the end, it does help you get closer to the professors and understand them a bit more.
Thanks for that, Joe.
That was perfect.
Okay. Do we have other questions before I move on to the next one? All right. Our next question is,
it's well, you can kind of see what it's like right now. This is our little tiny lab room. You want to
Right, yeah, sure.
To have a window here.
oh yeah, some grad schools are prisons. Their
Yes.
offices are prisons, so you don't even get a window to look after, but we do. Except we just look at the police department parking lot. So
Yeah.
that's what we have, because our offices are on top of the police department for some reason.
Yeah.
But the window is amazing. The three of us
Yeah,
all
cool.
have windows.
Yeah, you can't really see it from here, but man, it's nice. No, so in all seriousness, a lot of what we do happens pretty much just in our office space. Last year, since you know the pandemic prevented a lot of people from being able to come to school, doing like experimental work, you know, stuff that we would normally do, or like fraction ball,
Yeah.
you know, out of school was like a no-go, right? We couldn't do that. So like people had to get kind of creative last year in terms of like how to do their actual experiments, how to run their studies. A lot of people did stuff online. So I ran all my experiments like over Zoom calls, where I just had my participants like download a bunch of stuff, and I was like, okay, run this on your computer and then give me the results basically. You know, we had to get kind of creative. But that, well, that's like kind of the most fun that we have sometimes with the research projects that we do. Most of our time is pretty much just spent in the office, like looking at data, reading papers, or writing.
Yeah. Or in meetings.
Or in meetings, so many meetings.
Yes, tons of meetings with different research groups that you may participate with your advisor to figure out, you know, how your life is going. Things like this, which I actually enjoy a lot. Like this continues to motivate me. Or if you're teaching, right, you're meeting to teach or to learn, because you also take classes. So our first 2 years we take mandatory classes each quarter. So we're on the quarter system. I think, and I would add, it can be, I've had a lot of fun. We figured out ways to engage with the community. So if you do more research with like communities, we've done a lot of Zoom calls with like teachers and parents and children, because we are trying to co-create new mathematical, educational, or even scientific products. And I know, and I'll let Joseph also share some of his cool stuff that he's been
Yeah,
working
Joseph
on
does
too.
a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
So.
You guys are hyping me up too much. They were giving a good perspective on like social science, education, psychology, you know, basic science as well as applied science, in this kind of around the social science space. I also wanted to give a perspective if you were like wanting to go into like chem or bio, because a lot of that was what I did in my undergrad. And so that in a wet lab environment, it's pretty much in the instead of like in your office, you're in the lab, right? And so you're like in a fume hood, or you've got a lab bench, and you're pipetting and you're running experiments all day long. You have RAs or fruit flies, or you're running chemicals in test tubes. Like all of that does happen. Stuff that you can't do online. That's very common over in the STEM sciences realm at UCI. And as an undergrad, I was just like counting fruit flies and pipetting all day long, while the graduate student was also running the data and counting fruit flies and pipetting all day long. So that's kind of a perspective on like the wet lab experience as well. A lot of it is similar in the sense that just the setting is a little bit different. But to what Ed and Daniela was saying, some of what my research involves virtual reality and augmented reality and playing with really fancy cameras doing experimental media. And so I have an awesome benefit of where my day never looks the same. And I work with undergrads and research assistants to play with like $1 million cameras and like virtual reality and drones and stuff like that. We go out to the schools and we film kids doing all kinds of wacky stuff, and then I research and write about it. So that part is kind of cool, and we're currently working on a project right now. And in my office, which is directly across from Daniela and Ed, it's just filled with camera equipment right now because we're getting ready to film kids learning math, doing spatial reasoning and visual representations. We're going to be filming it with these 4K and 8K cameras, as well as filming it in virtual reality. And then we're going to be creating an iPad-based gamified lesson with it, and then research and write about it.
I just want to emphasize we do a lot of writing and a lot of reading as well.
That takes up a majority of our time, gotta say. Oh, and just to clarify one more time. So like Joseph has had experiences in the STEM, right? So he's been in a wet lab. So when we refer to the word lab, we more or less just refer to like a workshopping group.
Yeah.
It's kind of like people with a with a similar interest or like combined interest in something that we're trying to like think of research or think of ways to like solve like different questions that we want to answer, different problems we want to solve. And then, then it gets into the process of like, what data do we need? Do we need to do an experiment, right? How many people we got to recruit? Like, how many undergrads do I need to help us do this? That kind of stuff.
And mentoring, I guess, you've done a lot of mentoring for undergrads too, like, teaching
True.
These research skills and
and
counting the fruit flies and pipetting. That takes a lot of skills. Fruit flies are tiny, and how do you count so many of them? Pipetting is very fine motor skills too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to the point what Ed and Daniela are making, like the beauty of like social science research is I feel like in the word lab is kind of like we're think tanks. We kind of just come together and we're like, we have mutual interests, or sometimes it's very different interests, but then we're like coming together to solve a problem, and what is the problem we're trying to solve? Which in a lot of cases also match like what industry research is, and like joining a research group, at a company or a tech company and things like that. It's like, what problem are we going to solve today?
I might actually have a question off of that as well, just out of curiosity. If someone were to be, let's say, more of a, they probably like to call themselves like a lone wolf, someone that doesn't really like to collaborate with others, like to work on their own. Are most PhD candidacy and programs like that, is it all usually revolved around working with others, or is there any programs or anything designed for maybe just an individual if they wanted to do it that way?
That's a great question. So this kind of gets at something I wanted to say earlier too, and I'll say it in my response to your question. It definitely varies. So I think we're fortunate because we wanted more team science kind of work here, and it's a very interdisciplinary department. And so we have economists, sociologists, educational psychologists, everybody, because they kind of want to encourage that. But there are departments where it's more solo work. And there's also fields where it's more solo work. So like historians, if they might do specific research where they like go look for archives, historical documents, and then that's their research. It's kind of very much like, this is me, right? And then we write it up. So if someone likes that, there's definitely a place for that. And if not, there's definitely also places to do more, I guess, socially engaging kind of work.
You can definitely get a sense for what a field is going to be like, whether it's like value solo work with opposed to like teamwork. If you look at certain papers from like fields like psychology, and you see like tons of names on it, like a lot of STEM journals will have like a million people that are listed as authors on a paper. You get a sense that, okay, this is a team job, right? A lot of social science papers as well. So like education, especially because we're interdisciplinary, with, you know, psych, econometrics, all that. We usually have a lot of names on the papers too, because we all like to work together on it. But then you also get people, you know, there's individual differences. There's variability within departments and across people as well. So like I know a couple people within our department who have written solo papers because they're just interested, very like hyper focused on something that they wanted to do, and they just went and did it. You know, like they might get some advice from somebody or like somebody to look over their papers who like edits and stuff, but like their ideas, everything that they did, all on them. So it happens both ways.
Oh, one thing I wanted to add that we haven't said is some programs do take longer depending on whatever field you want to go into, because some graduate students are working towards writing a book in their field, which is so
Yeah, like sociology.
Yeah, it could be like 6 to 8 years. Like I have a neighbor, because I live in student housing here. His program, he's in engineering. It's an 8-year program because there's just a lot of training going on.
Thanks, guys. That was solid insight. Appreciate it.
I don't see any additional questions, so we got one more. Recommendations. Yeah, any recommendations on what you can be doing now to improve your chances of getting into a good program later on? So I think we've hinted at a couple of things already throughout this panel. Let me reiterate just a couple of them that I can actually remember right now. One, definitely take courses in things that you're interested in, right? That's a big one. And in those courses, if you like the professor, try to talk to them in like an office hours, right? Over Zoom or whatever time you can get, or just like through an email to get to know them. Because when it comes to eventually getting like a letter of rec for a PhD program, you want to make sure the person like knows you and wouldn't just write a letter that says, hey, you know, this person got an A in my class. Like, I think they're good for grad school. Those are not great letters. So it's super important that you actually talk to a professor who would be able to write a letter for you. And it should be in something that you're interested in.
Sorry, sometimes you can do an independent study too if you're
in that kind that's of an option. Yeah. What was the other thing I wanted to say? I just mentioned taking classes. Oh, research. Definitely, if you want to get into a PhD program, get some research experience for sure. Like if there's a lab that you can, or a research symposium or a conference that you can like present something for, do it. But underrated, but you should also participate in research. So like if there's like a study going on and you know you can get some money out of it, just do it, right? One is free money. Two, you get a sense of what it's like to be on that end of research, right? So you can be the participant, and then from that experience, you have a better idea of what you could do later on as the experimenter or as the research scientist.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you can't do that, read into it, right? Like find those articles, or maybe there's a book you like that you've been reading about something you're interested in. Even just having that knowledge can help you tie together an application that speaks to your interests. And I think one thing that most programs are looking for is for you to have a very nicely defined interest for your research, whether that's a specific problem or a specific population that you want to help. That helps a lot because it just shows the program whether you're a good fit for them or not, if they can help you pursue that work. Sometimes you might not be accepted if you're not a good fit for them, not necessarily if you're not a good student or candidate. It's just that they can't offer you the training that you deserve or should receive for what you want to do.
Oh, and if you want to read something, but you're not like super sure what is good to read, ask an expert, ask a professor. They'll likely have a lot of book recommendations for you for stuff that would, kind of give you an entry into a field of interest that you would want to be in.
Sometimes it could be a little bit intimidating to go into office hours. I know for me, it certainly was. And then like, there's like the guilt of like wasting the professor's time when you're not there to talk about like the class. I'd say do it anyway because they're not thinking that you're wasting their time. If anything, they're really happy that like students show up. And then the other thing is like I TA'd for Ed over the summer. Ed was teaching his own class, and we had a student who was really interested in instructional design, and she instead of going, oh no, it was spring, it was with Janice, wasn't it? So she reached out to me and Ed as a TA, and then Ed referred her over to me, and then we had an informal conversation, and now she's my undergraduate research assistant this quarter. And so, because oftentimes graduate students are the one actively doing the research, so graduate students are a great resource to also consistently bug and like ask them about it, because just as much as professors love talking about their research, grad students love talking about research as well.
Okay. And it's probably going to be a little easier talking to a grad student than it is talking to a professor. So if you get into a class that has like a TA, and that could be like kind of like a middleman to get towards talking to the professor at some point. But also like the TA might actually have like opportunities for you too. Right?
And I saw the question come from Devin, like what's a good source of finding active studies to participate in? Graduate students and are a pretty good resource. Like Ed was giving out $30 all summer long for his study.
Sorry, not doing that anymore.
And then I know at UCI it was a pretty common thing over in BioSci to like post a bunch of flyers. You'll see like here's $30 to play Minecraft for an hour, or like here's $30 to get your brain scanned for this study. And so on campus there is that kind of like lively vibe that you'll see often around posted. But also I think a lot of the site courses, what is that service that you guys students can get extra credit for? Yeah, you want to talk about that, Ed? Or Daniella?
Yes, so I can talk about it. And I was just trying to look up what resources OCC has for it, but I'm probably not the best person to ask because I'm just literally just Googling it right now. But many research institutions and state colleges as well will have some kind of system set up on their site for people to sign up for like different research studies. So for ours, we have what's called the Human Subjects Lab Pool over at the Social Sciences. And it's also just called SONA. And it's just a system for you to like basically find a slot for like a study that you're interested in participating in. And then it's as simple as signing up and clicking on like a time slot that you want to do. I'm not sure if OCC has that in particular, but I would suggest just researching it yourself if you can to see if something like that is available. If not, sometimes, and this depends if you're actually on campus or not, because we do this too. Sometimes people like will find like billboards or like walls and stuff, and they'll just slap flyers on there for like those things that you can, those little tabs that you can pull for like for information or contact information about like a study that you want to participate in. So if you see those around, give them a quick look. It sounds like something you want to do. It doesn't look super sketchy. Go for it.
One last recommendation, like the last resort, there's Amazon MTurk, which is a place where you could go get paid to take surveys and participate in research. And sometimes psychologists or other people will put their surveys or even experimental like surveys on there. And you could see what that's about, maybe in different domains that you think are interesting.
Dr. Ferguson just put in the chat. So if you want to participate in some research or some experiments, the current class that she's teaching right now has some opportunities for that. But it looks like OCC doesn't necessarily have formal or structured research opportunities. But when, as she says here in the chat, when you transfer over to like a 4-year, there'll probably be a lot. So Cal State's, UC's, liberal arts colleges too, if you want to transfer to those all had opportunities to do research.
And people love it. They love it when you want to be a part of research, whether it's as a participant, like a human subject, right? Or
People need
just
that.
to help, right? Like to be the researcher in the project too.
That's true.
Another recommendation I would make is start writing your essay early, very early, and get like as many people on it as possible. Whether it's like your friend, your parent, just for like readability, but then also definitely like the professors you're gonna reach out to get a recommendation for. Just having multiple eyes, using the writing center. I didn't know like my UCI had a writing center. The writing center, they're great. Like these people get paid to help people write. It's amazing. Like these people are really good writers as well, and they're geared towards helping students. It's a pipeline that's made to help students get into grad school or get a scholarship or get to a four-year university and things like that.
Wow, guys, that was really solid insight. Oh my gosh. Ran over 5 o'clock a little bit. I don't want to take away from you guys' thunder. That was seriously, I'm like blown away by how thorough and how much information you guys provided. I hope that we answered everybody's questions. If you guys want, we can adjourn the meeting, but we can also, if anyone has any extra questions, if you guys don't mind staying around, and if Dr. Ferguson, if you don't mind staying around a little bit, we can answer those as well. But if not, I know some people have some places to go. So I'm going to switch it back over to the agenda here. And I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting 5:04. Everyone, if you don't mind saying a big thank you to these guys. Seriously, you guys were incredible, absolutely incredible. So much useful information. I am blown away. I feel like I'm ready to go. Oh, thank you, Joseph, for dropping that in the chat for us. Yeah, so if you guys want to stick around and have any questions, you go ahead and can. Sounds like you guys don't mind waiting a little bit, but if not, then we can just go ahead and call it now. Let's see. Anyone have any extra questions for these guys, or should we give them a nice Tuesday to go enjoy themselves? What do you guys think?
Real quick, Devin.
Yeah.
I'll send you. I realize I never send my contact for people. So Danielle and I are gonna send it to you on email. You can send it out to the rest of the group.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. So I also have I saw that Dr. Ferguson is recording this meeting as well. So when I send out the minutes tomorrow, I'll also include you guys' contact information, and that way it gets out to everybody. So if they need to reach out to you guys, they can. Thank you so much for that too. I'm sure someone might be reaching out to you for it.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing. I guess we should. I'm just trying to figure out a day to have people come visit the campus.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fun. Yeah, I definitely.
Visit the police department office.
Yeah, I'll definitely get something coordinated. I might even include that in the email for tomorrow as well. We'll definitely coordinate something that is before the semester ends. And that way, maybe sometime in late November or December would be perfect for that. Thank you guys for that offer. That'd be fantastic. I'd love to have some people, I'm sure, come by and we can all be nice and socially distanced and hang out and be able to see the campus. That's a very sweet offer. Thank you guys. Anyone else? Any closing thoughts or any last questions for these guys? Looks like we're all good to go. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone who attended. You guys are all incredible. Like I said, this recording will be sent to everyone, including the minutes, and also any relevant information tomorrow via email. Big thank you again to Ed, Joseph, and Daniella. You guys were superstars. I'm so glad you guys came by. I will definitely be keeping in contact with you guys in general, just for my own interest, because I'm going to be like, what do I do? So you guys will be great sources for that. That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for the next meeting, and hope